The reason this feels so overwhelming isn't simply because there's a lot for you to do. Every generation of women has had a lot to do. That's not new. It's because no one has ever actually taught us as women what to do after we realize we're not unlimited. Well, I wonder if this has ever happened to you. I wonder if you've ever had this thought. Maybe you didn't even say it out loud. Maybe you just barely let yourself think it because thinking it felt too close to making it official and admitting it. But it sounded something like this. There just isn't enough of me anymore. Not enough time, not enough energy, not enough patience, not enough focus, not enough emotional bandwidth, just not enough of me. Maybe it hit you at the kitchen sink. Hands in dishwater, staring out the window, at nothing in particular. Maybe it hit you. Maybe it hit you in the carpool line with the engine running, and you were waiting for a kid who's always just 3 minutes later than you have enough patience for. Maybe it hit you at 11 p.m. when you were finally sitting down for the first time all day and someone in the house picked that exact moment to ask you one more question. Maybe it hit you in the shower, which, let's be honest, is the only place most of us get 5 uninterrupted minutes to think about anything at all. Wherever it hit you, I bet it didn't feel like this big revelation. It probably felt small and quiet and a little bit scary, like a crack you noticed in a wall that you had been leaning on for years. If you've ever felt that way, I want you to stick with me today because I don't think the problem is what you think it is. And I don't think the solution is either. And so, friend, we're going to jump in and talk about it. Well, if you've been following along and thinking, I need to go deeper, I need more, I want to invite you to something totally free that I've created. It's called Midlife Clutter Explained and Solved. This is my free Substack where every Tuesday I write a deeper unpacking of the real clutter that women are carrying. Not just the piles on the counter, but the mental load, the emotional backlog, the decision fatigue, the overthinking spirals. We break it down, we name it, we untangle it, and then on Fridays, I share a lighter post to help you reset your perspective before the weekend. Something that's grounding and clarifying and, of course, honest. If you've ever felt like your life looks fine on the outside but feels overloaded underneath, this is for you, and it's completely free. You can read it in 5 minutes or less, or you can sit with it longer if you choose. Just go to midlifeclutterhelp.com and subscribe to Midlife Clutter Explained and Solved. Because clutter isn't just about stuff, it's about capacity. And we're going to talk about it there. Well, hey, friend, welcome to the conversation. I am Jennifer Rothkamp, and if this is your first time here, know that I'm a certified strategist and life coach and mom of 9, and someone who has spent the last several years helping women just like you learn how to navigate survival mode a little bit better and get back in the driver's seat of their life. And know that I also don't do fluff here. I don't do toxic positivity. I'm not going to tell you that you've got this, sis, and send you on your way. What I will do is tell you the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, because I think you're strong enough to hear it. And today's truth, this is a big one. So I've been sitting with this topic for a while, actually longer than usual, because it's the kind of thing that it's easy to feel and it's hard to say out loud without sounding like it's all drama. But I think it's time that we said it anyway, because I have a feeling that there are a lot of people listening to me who have been carrying this quietly, wondering if you're the only one. So grab your coffee, maybe you're folding your laundry or whatever you're doing, listen, and let's get into it. So really the past few weeks I've been thinking about something, and I don't think I've ever put it into words before. Not to a client, not to my husband, not even really to myself outside of these past few weeks. For years, maybe even decades, I think many of us we have unknowingly lived under an assumption. We assumed that there would always be enough of us, enough energy, enough patience, enough time, enough emotional bandwidth, enough resilience, enough grit. We assumed that no matter what life handed us, we'd somehow just stretch a little bit farther and we'd be able to figure it out. that we'd find the extra hour, that we'd dig up the extra patience, that we'd absorb one more thing because that's just what we do. So think back to when you were maybe a young mom. Maybe you had one baby or two babies and life was full, but it was manageable. It was the kind of manageable full. You were tired, of course, but you had margin. You had a little bit left over at the end of the day. And then life added more. Maybe more kids, maybe a job, or maybe a bigger job, maybe aging parents or child with health needs, maybe a marriage that needed more attention than it used to. Maybe you became the one that everyone in your house or your family or your friend group came to when something needed to get handled. You became the default person, the one who remembers the dentist appointments and knows where the permission slip is and notices when someone's shoes don't fit anymore, the one who holds the whole invisible map of everyone else's life in her head, in addition to her own. You became the one who notices that the fridge is almost empty before anyone else does, the one whose phone buzzes when the high school coach needs to talk to someone. The in-laws, the doctor's offices, they reach out to you too, all in the same afternoon, and somehow it gets assumed that you'll handle every single one of these things without dropping anything else. Nobody sat you down and appointed you to this role. It just kind of accumulated, one small thing at a time, until one day you looked up and you realized that you were basically running the operating system for an entire household and possibly an entire extended family and maybe even a team at work too. And after a long time, we figured it out. We eventually we found a way. We got a system or we just powered through. And either way, we kept making it work. We told ourselves that it was just a busy season. We told ourselves that it would calm down after the project wrapped up, or after the kids got a little bit older, or after we got through the holidays. We kept moving the finish line because as long as there was a finish line out there somewhere, the exhaustion felt temporary. It felt survivable. It was just part of the deal. But eventually, something changes. Not because you did anything wrong, but because it's just the way life is. You didn't get lazy, you didn't get less disciplined, and it's really not about you at all. Nobody tells you this part when you're 25 and just starting out. Nobody hands you a warning label, I guess. You find out the hard way, usually in a season that you didn't see coming. Usually at a moment that feels like it came out of nowhere, even though, if you're honest, it's been building for years. I found this out the hard way too. And I want to tell you about it, not because it's a pretty story, but because I think you need to hear it. I think you need to hear that someone who teaches this for a living has lived every bit of the same story. So I want to tell you about a season in my life where it hit me so hard, I still think about this season. I teach women all the time about not doing it all, about protecting themselves, about serving their families and their people without losing themselves in the process. I talk about how burning the candle at both ends is eventually going to catch up with you. And then, in the middle of one of the hardest seasons that I've ever had, I did the exact opposite of everything I teach. I was in full burnout. I wasn't just tired. I was bone deep exhausted, the kind where you wake up already behind. But I kept going because I wasn't protecting myself. I was letting my family essentially walk all over me. And honestly, I knew it when it was happening. I just didn't want to keep fighting about it. So I just kept letting it happen. I was so sick of the pushback. I was so sick of people who didn't want to help. And it just honestly, my husband in that season felt like someone, just one more person that I needed to carry instead of someone carrying things with me. It felt like everyone around me was focused on themselves while they watched me run on empty and burn out. And I kept telling myself that it was easier just to do it all than it was to feel the sting of asking and getting told no and not getting the help that I needed and getting silence maybe instead. So I overfunctioned. I kept moving. And in some twisted way, staying busy gave my nervous system a break from the conflict that I didn't want to have. But it also wore me down to absolutely nothing. Now, here's the part that still gets me. I knew better, right? I teach this stuff, I live it, except in that season, I didn't. I refused to apply the very principles that I hand out to my clients every single week. And that made it worse because it wasn't just the exhaustion anymore. It was the shame of knowing that I'd betrayed my own advice. But naming it out loud finally is what gave me the power to change it. That season didn't break me in some dramatic movie ending climax sort of way. It broke open something quieter than that. It was more like an honest reckoning, a reminder that boundaries aren't just something that I teach other women. They're something that I have to actually live too, especially when it's hard, especially when no one is clapping for you when you finally say no. And I tell you that story because I don't want you to think that I'm up here talking about capacity like I've never run out of my own capacity. I have more than once. And every single time, the wake up call looked the same. There wasn't enough of me. And no amount of trying harder was going to manufacture more of me somehow. And what gets me looking back is how long I white knuckled it trying to get through before I said anything out loud. I kept thinking that if I could just hold on a little bit longer, things would shift on their own. Someone would notice, someone would offer, but nobody did. And it wasn't because they didn't love me, but because I hadn't actually said the words. I was waiting to be rescued from a situation that I hadn't even named yet, and that's an exhausting place to live in. And again, I'm not telling you because I have it all figured out now. I still catch myself doing versions of this. I don't think this is a lesson that you learn once and you never revisit. I think it's a lesson that you keep learning in different seasons, in different ways for the rest of your life. And so the goal isn't to arrive somewhere and never run low again. The goal is to recognize it and to recognize what's going on faster and to respond with it with more honesty every single time it happens. Now, I want you to picture the moment that this realization actually hits because it's usually not this big dramatic thing. It's not a breakdown in the middle of the grocery store, although it could be that, but usually it's quiet. And one day you're doing the same things that you always do. You're making lunches, you're answering the emails, you're driving to practice, you're checking in on your mom. And somewhere in the middle of an entirely ordinary Tuesday, a thought, it just slips into your mind. And once you think it, once it slips in there, you can't unthink it. And the thought is, there just isn't enough of me. And that thought is terrifying. And it's not because it's dramatic, but it's because it's true. And you don't know what to do with true things that don't have an easy fix. And here's the strange thing about that kind of moment. It rarely arrives when things are at their worst. It usually arrives in the middle of an entirely normal day, which almost makes it worse. There's no crisis to point to. There's no single point that you can blame. It's just an ordinary Tuesday and a thought that hits you right between the eyes. And here's what happens next. Almost every time, your brain, it immediately starts listing everything you can't stop doing. Well, I can't stop working. I can't stop taking care of people. I can't stop paying the bills. I can't stop showing up for my kids, my parents, my job, my community. And so you sit there with this realization ringing in your ears and you think, so what now? And I want you to sit in that question for a second instead of rushing past it, because most of us do rush past it. We hear that thought and we panic a little bit, and then we immediately drown it out with another task, another item on the list. Anything to avoid actually answering that question of, what now? Sometimes we handle it by getting quietly resentful. You keep doing everything, but there's an edge to it now. You snap a little faster, you sigh a little louder. You start keeping a mental tally of who did what, and it doesn't feel good. But it also doesn't stop. Sometimes we handle it by disappearing into something numbing, a show, a scroll, a glass of wine at the end of the day. That isn't really about the wine at all. It's about wanting 5 minutes where nothing is being asked of you. And sometimes we handle it by doubling down. Sometimes we decide that the answer must be that you're not trying hard enough. And so you buy the planner, you download the app, you set the earlier alarm, and you hope that this time the system clicks. But it rarely does. And it's not because you're undisciplined, it's because the tool was never built to solve the actual problem. But the question, what now? It deserves an answer. So let's give it one. Here's what I want you to understand, and I say this with so much compassion because I've felt the exact same hopelessness myself. The reason this feels so overwhelming isn't simply because there's a lot for you to do. Every generation of women has had a lot to do. That's not new. It's because no one has ever actually taught us as women what to do after we realize we're not unlimited. Think back to the advice that you've been given your whole life. Buy another planner. Time block your calendar. Wake up at 5. Be more disciplined. Get a better system. Meal prep on Sundays. Say no more often, they say, without ever telling you how to actually do that without the guilt just eating you up alive. Now, know that none of that is bad advice exactly, but none of it answers the real question that's underneath all of it. The real question is this: what do I do now that I know there isn't enough of me to go around? That's not a scheduling problem. You cannot time block your way out of that question. You cannot buy a cute planner and fix it. It's a different kind of problem entirely, and it deserves a different kind of answer. And I think, really, that that's exactly why so many capable, smart, hardworking women feel like they're failing at something they can't even name. You're not failing at productivity. You're trying to solve a capacity problem with a time management tool, and it was never going to work no matter how much discipline you could muster up. Think about how many times you've tried to fix this feeling that we're talking about right now with the wrong tool. You color-coded the calendar. You set reminders for the reminders. You woke up earlier and then earlier again until you were getting up before the sun just to claw back a little quiet before the day started. And for a week or two, it did help. And then life added one more thing, and the whole structure, it buckled again, and you were right back where you started. Except now you ended up feeling like a failure for not making the system stick. And that really is the hopeless part. It's not the workload. Women have carried heavy loads for generations and they have found a way through it. It's the quiet, exhausting cycle of trying solution after solution, watching every one of those solutions work for a minute and then collapse. And in the process, you're slowly starting to believe that the problem then, it must be you because it's happening over and over again. But here's the thing, the problem wasn't you. It was never you. It was the tool. And I hear this from women all the time in my own community. Smart women, capable women, women who run households and careers in carpools and budgets without dropping a single ball for years at a time. And they tell me in a way that they're almost embarrassed. I don't understand why I can't just get it together. As if getting it together was just a matter of willpower. It never was. You've had plenty of willpower. What you haven't had is a framework that actually matches the real problem. Now, here's the thought that changed everything for me, and it's really only the real teaching that I'm going to give you today. And I want this to sit with you. I've come to believe that our most valuable resource isn't actually our time. It's actually us. Because every commitment costs more than just minutes on a calendar. It costs energy and attention and focus and emotional bandwidth and mental space. And every single commitment, big or small, asks for a piece of you. We've been trained to think about our lives in terms of hours. Do I have an hour for this? Can I fit this into my Tuesday? But hours were never the real currency. You could have an entirely open afternoon and still have absolutely nothing left to give it because the hour was available, but you weren't. That's the piece that nobody talks about. That's the piece that I wish someone would have told me 20 years ago, back when I still believed that if I just managed my time better, everything else would fall into place. It doesn't work that way because you are not a calendar. You are a person, and people run on capacity, not just clock time. Think about it like a phone battery for a second. You have an entire free afternoon, hours and hours of open time on the calendar, and you can have that open and you can still be sitting at 2%. The hours, they were available, but you weren't. And no amount of staring at an empty calendar is going to help you. It's going to help change you back, and it's not going to help charge you back up. What charges you back up is something else entirely, and most of us were never taught what it is, let alone how to protect it. I am fairly sure that we have all met someone who seems to run at 100% for hours longer than everyone else in the room, and someone else who's drained after 20 minutes doing the exact same thing. That's not about who's stronger or who's more disciplined. That's what capacity looks like, and it's real, even though nobody ever taught us to track it or budget it or protect it the way that we've been taught to track every dollar in our bank account. And that's the shift. We need to stop asking, do I have time for this? And we need to start asking, do I have the capacity for this? And if I don't, what would it cost me to say yes anyway? That is the question. And that single question changes everything about how you maneuver through your day. So then where does that leave us? Well, I don't think that the answer is becoming someone who has more capacity. I don't think the goal is to somehow expand yourself until you can hold indefinitely more than you already do. I am fairly certain that the answer is learning how to use the capacity that you already have more intentionally. And I'm not going to tell you how to do that today. I'm actually not going to teach you that piece yet. But I want to let you know, I just want you to let that idea breathe a bit for a minute, because I think it's the beginning of something that could genuinely change things for you. For a long time, when I really let this idea sink in, I realized that there wasn't something wrong with me. I wasn't failing. I was expecting something from myself that no human being could actually sustain. And it again wasn't because I was weak, and it wasn't because I lacked discipline, but it was because I was asking a finite person to behave like an infinite resource and calling it a personal failure every time reality caught up with me. That reframe, it changed everything for me, and maybe it will for you too. There's something almost relieving about it if you really let it just kind of sit. Because if the problem is that you're broken, you spend your whole life trying to fix a flaw that was never really there. But if the problem is that you were asking a finite person with limited resources to act infinite, then the fix isn't to become superhuman. It's to get honest about what you actually have to give and start making decisions from that honest place instead of from guilt or fear or from the assumption that everyone else seems to be managing just fine. So you should be able to as well. You don't know what everyone else's life looks like underneath the surface. You only know your own. And your own life has asked a lot of you. And it's okay to admit that out loud. So let me give you a few key takeaways before we wrap this all up today. You are not unlimited, and that was never the goal. For years, you assumed that you'd always find more energy, more patience, more time. And you didn't fail when you ran out. You were actually finally meeting reality. Takeaway number 2, time management can't fix a capacity problem. Every commitment costs more than minutes on your calendar. It costs your attention and your energy and your emotional bandwidth. A cuter planner was never going to fix that. Takeaway 3, the hopelessness isn't about how much you have to do. It's that no one ever taught you what to do once you realized you're not unlimited. That's not a personal failure. That's a missing piece of the puzzle. Takeaway 4, the real shift isn't finding more capacity. It's learning to spend the capacity you already have on purpose. You don't need to become someone new. You need a different way of deciding what deserves you. Takeaway 5, you are allowed to notice this before you know how to fix it, by the way. You don't need the whole answer today. You literally just need to stop pretending that the feeling of there's not enough of me to go around isn't real. And you need to start paying attention to where your capacity actually goes. So I want to leave you with one question today, not 20, just one question. What if you've been trying to solve the wrong problem all along? Just let that be uncomfortable. Just sit with that for a second. Most of us have spent years trying to become more disciplined and more organized and more efficient, thinking that that was the answer. And maybe none of those things was ever the real problem to fix. But I don't think I don't think that's been the answer. I think the real problem has been hiding underneath all of those things the whole time, waiting for someone to actually notice what it is. So, over the next little bit, I'm going to share something that I've actually never taught before. It's a completely different way of thinking about planning and priorities and why so many women feel overwhelmed no matter how hard they try or how many systems they attempt. I genuinely cannot wait to share it with you because I think it has the potential to change the way that you make decisions for years to come. Not just what you do on a Tuesday, but how you decide what deserves you at all. Not just for this season, but for every season after this one, because I don't think this problem goes away once your kids are older or your schedule finally slows down. I think it shows up in a different costume. For now, I just want you to notice. Notice when you catch yourself thinking, there isn't enough of you. Notice the moment you reach for another planner or a 5 a.m. alarm or another system that you suspect won't hold. And instead of grabbing for that tool, just ask yourself that one question. What if the problem was never how much time I have? What if it was always about what I've been spending myself on? I don't expect that one question to fix everything today because it won't. But I do think it's the first honest question that a lot of us have gone years without asking. And sometimes the first honest question is what cracks everything else open. So just notice it for this week. Don't fix it. Don't overhaul your whole life by Thursday. Just start paying attention to where you're spending yourself and how much of it you're actually choosing versus how much you've always just assumed was non-negotiable. And I think you're going to be surprised what you find. I know I was. And that's it. That's what I have for you today, friend. I'll talk to you again next time.